You're very welcome to this session, Guidebook launch on technology and digital accessibility toolkit for NGOs. My name is Mika Velitalo. I work for Fingo, particularly the Fingo Powerbank program. And just a bit of a background. Fingo Powerbank program concentrates particularly on the use of technology, digital tools, innovation, and partnerships to enhance NGOs' work in Finland and in East Africa particularly, and also more widely in the global South. And the reason why we are here is that disability inclusion is also one of the cross-cutting themes in the Powerbank program, and obviously very important theme for most NGOs as well. And during already last year, we realized that there isn't really a practical, tangible guidebook for NGOs available. There's a lot of material out there, but just how to bring it all together and have kind of a launch pad or starting place. So that was missing. And luckily, we were able to join forces with Abilis Consulting, and thanks to Thomas Ture and James O'Sullivan. They great work. The guidebook is now ready and ready to be launched. You have already received the link to that toolkit, so feel free to browse. But during the next 20 minutes or so, Thomas will also present the key content of the toolkit. This is also the first time that we are using automatic closed captioning, kind of subtitles. So you should be able to see them on the bottom of the screen. And this is something we are now testing. It's not perfect, but I think it should be part of the this kind of events in the future. And if you are organizing Zoom events, it's possible to click it on in the Zoom. But there are lots of other good points, guidance, tools in the toolkit, so do get to know it. But now I would like to give the floor to Thomas so that he can present the content. And after that, we'll have time to get questions, comments, ideas, wishes, and have a kind of Q&A and discussion on these topics.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. So my name is Tuomas Puurem, and I'm coming from Abilis Foundation in Finland. I think I know quite a lot of you on the names of the list, but I used to work in Threshold Association for a long time, which is Kynnys ry in Finnish, with the late Kalle Könkkölä, and I've been involved with the inclusion issues in the development front for about 1 decade now. And I am currently working with the Abilis Foundation on the advocacy programs. And as we have progressed in the last couple of years in terms of providing more mainstreamed inclusion and inclusive practices to all levels of development in all thematic areas and all individual areas such as technology, human resources, whether it's sanitation, whether it's intergovernmental organization, whether it's Finnish NGOs. So it's very broad kind of effort. And for this kind of effort, we have created a couple of years ago a consultancy company called the Abilis Consulting, which is wholly owned by Abilis Foundation that does the development, but then through the consulting, we use disabled experts in Finland and around the world to collaborate on inclusive topics. So it's a very the kind of human rights based way of advancing inclusion, because we try to use disabled individuals themselves, and then we always seek to use whenever possible disabled people on the ground, as if you would say. For example, if the task would be concerning Kenya, we would prefer Kenyan disabled people, and this kind of subsidiary principle. And in the technology front, in this kind of task, we have tried to consult as much abroad as possible, but this is still very much the opening phase. But I'm gonna, if you can, Mika, tell if it works, I'm gonna try to share the entire, does it look well if I try to share the entire screen now?
Yeah, I've stopped now sharing, so you can go ahead and it should be there. Yeah.
Is it there? It looks fine.
Yes.
Good. So yeah, the work is called the Fingo Powerbank Digital Accessibility Toolkit. I'd like to highlight that this is in fact a tool. It's not really a theoretical book. It has plenty of theoretical background in it, but it's not a theoretical book. It's actually supposed to be as practical guideline as possible. So here is the front page, and this will be published today. So it's collaborated by Abilis Consulting and Fingo. I was authoring this with Mika and my colleague James O'Sullivan from Abilis Consulting, and it has all our references and contacts inside. I would say that here already in the introduction, it says that it's created to help Finnish development organization utilizing practical technology, informative, and it consists of information, guidance, and just recommendations. And already our order is not to invent the wheel again. So we have mainly tried to start with gathering everything that's already existing in the field of technology and development, and how it consists of broader information, but also like very, very practical when it comes to very practical level, like individual kind of disability, like visual impairment, deafness, physical disability, like what are the very practical tools that you can guide. So it's mainly, I hope this will be utilized just as a resource, that since nothing like this, as Mika mentioned in the opening, nothing like this has really been done before, in the sense that we have done a lot of disability consultancy on various topics, but actually disability inclusion in IT or assistive technology has not been approached as an issue of its own before. So it's something brand new. And the other thing is that, for example, when we have conducted this kind of a guidebook on accessible water, hygiene, and sanitation, the most valuable input for us was then to use it on the ground. So we basically put out a manual for accessible sanitation and then waited for people around the world to actually use it and then tell what was useful and what was not. So we hope that this will be utilized in the same kind of way, that this is it's something new. It hasn't been done before in the area of disability and inclusion, and we seek out to do as practical work as possible. So it has very little basic background theory on disability. Yes, I think it's very necessary to have, but it's important that even if you are not that well acquainted with disability policies or with disability content, it's not supposed to be something something that demands lots of theoretical point of view. It's mainly tried to be an introduction to the topics and all the political and development discussions around the disability topic, but then very quickly go to the practical contents and you can utilize it then. One thing I have to keep in mind here is that what separates disability inclusion in generally and in technology is that the huge advancement in technological sphere all the time. It's constantly evolving. So whereas in many other thematic areas where we work on, or for example, I think you can do the comparison on children's rights or gender issues or any other kind of human rights topic, there are obviously the permanent baseline existing kind of information going on. And we already know, for example, in humanitarian context or any other, we have pretty good grasp of the good practices. Now, what separates IT is that innovations are coming in all the time. For example, lots of the content for this work that we collected July last year is already non-relevant in the terms of topics. First of all, some of the collaborative projects, what's being developed, have already gone further since. And at the same time, we have had more and more disabled people here and there to use and then give actual feedback, because nothing gets perfected immediately. So through this kind of feedback mechanism, things are then obviously constantly improving, because nothing gets ready on the first try. And what separates this kind of IT technology topic from other areas of inclusion is that there are multi-stakeholder approach going on all the time. There are lots of private companies doing access. Digital technology overall in developed countries is moving to be more inclusive day by day. There are lots of startups going on, so there are new innovations that will be presented throughout the years, and lots of the already existing platforms and solutions are constantly being developed and evolved. So my understanding at this stage would be that we hope that this will be useful for the time being, and useful especially in the way that people who seek to use this in their work, making their work more inclusive and bringing technology more into supporting the context without being additional burden, making the context of disability access more relevant to their work. So it's more mainstream into human rights approach anyway, or making technological solutions that make the existing work easier, and once again not being additional burden. From this kind of experience, we can then gather feedback, what works, what was clear, what was not that practical, what was easy to scale out, what was difficult to scale out, what requires too much human resources. So all of these kind of topics are then something I hope that during the next year to 2 years, we can gather constant feedback. And once again, when we say what kind of tips and solutions there are now in place, in the next year, the situation will once again change due to the constant flow of new topics. So that separates this kind of constant development. I think this presents to many other issues that are used in the Fingo Powerbank as well, but especially like innovation and technology, the change is much faster than in other fields of development. So just to say that in the guideline, the section 1 is just a very practical, very basics kind of introduction to disability and inclusion, like in terms of what does inclusion actually mean in the field of development, where have we come from, where are we going with the topic, what are the basic issues around disability, and why has, for example, if you think about why has the relevance of disability increased a lot during the past 5 years, there has been lots of work done by multi-planner of Finnish actors, but at the same time, multilateral donors and humanitarian donors have found this kind of recent interest to disability that actually, I would say, spearheaded from the 2016 year onwards. So disability, where is disability now in the topic, and what does mainstreaming actually mean? But it's very basic also, like if you are thinking about what we mean with a disability, what are barriers, why is inclusion something that's vital to all development, and why is it something that's just makes all work better without creating extra burden? It just provides this kind of very basic level of answers. But once again, it's not a theoretical guideline, it's supposed to be practical. So that's just the opening summary. So in the section 2, we have created the sections A and B. The section A provides this kind of quick breakthrough where you can try out 10 simple examples how to improve the level of access in the work you do. It's just like very practical, that there are thousands of tips and good solutions, but to get a grasp, what do we mean with a good solution or a good practice? They are just some of what we have now selected. And then the brief part of B, and I think this is vital for all of you who are planning development and making like project framework kind of plans for multi-years approach, that what's the scope of disabilities to use innovations as a tool in development. So because before the kind of startup scene, there was this perception that inclusion is always very expensive. It's something for Western countries, it's something for developed countries, and making anything very inclusive requires a lot of money. But this has changed a lot. First of all, technical innovations are often free. They're often very cheap. They have been developed very locally. They pop in here and there. And especially now during the COVID, you have noticed that the whole concept of working and studying by a distance has actually, it provides a huge sphere where we can influence the lives of lots of disabled people that previously would not have been affected by development solutions. But at the same time, when we are seeking to grow economies globally or in global south, you have to take the consumer and kind of broader population vital. Is vital for the overall development. So the fact that disabled people can be included in the overall process, not just as targets, but as active players and people who can also collaborate with private sector, that's something that's very important. The section 3 is our digital solutions portfolio, and it's very similar to part 1 that we have just when we think about what's a good digital solution, okay, what could this context mean? We have selected some really good solutions that you can try to utilize immediately. And once again, this is that instead of being too theoretical, this is something you can actually already go and try and see, okay, this works. This is unclear to me, like how could I utilize this? So it's supposed to be something that's very, very practical, and we have gathered, I would say, we have gathered most of the leading solutions at the moment that enable people with disabilities to access digital services. Then the section 4, the key tips to stakeholders for collaboration. It's very important to do inclusion in a right way, consulting and keeping people with disabilities involved all the time. And we have just corrected what kind of good solutions we have found for this topic, that what kind of steps one can take to improve quality and make sure human rights based and participatory approach is always followed. And especially those of you, I noticed in the participatory list here now, who are doing planning, and you're doing like strategic planning for your organization or your NGO or so on. It's very good to integrate inclusion issues and also technological access issues into the long-term strategy, and this kind of very step-by-step approach, because promoting inclusion is a very big thing. It's a very profound, major thing. It's not something you do with one project. it's not a project issue. It's something where you have to change the dynamics of also how you do work. So this kind of big structural changes usually take a while, and we have noticed, especially with Abilis and Abilis Consulting, as we work with some organization, it's usually often very good to take 3-year or 4-year or even 5-year kind of framework where there is like this step-by-step approach of generally making inclusion reality, instead of trying to do very quick solutions that are often a bit superficial and then don't lead to permanent changes. And it's also, I think, good for human resource point of view that if disability inclusion requires lots of extra human resources, extra work, then that's not really feasible for organizations, as we know that the overall level of human resource available is not that great. So how can we, this kind of through multi-year approach with even a larger organization, it makes it more, I would say, realistic and humane to do constant improving of actions on inclusion without creating additional burden for individual employees, or creating the kind of targets that are too ambitious to reach, which then usually leads to the fact that they are not realized at all. Some of the good tips we have here are how to promote the step-by-step approach, how to use qualified disabled people's organizations, how to consider the differences in technological development, especially what kind of equipment people have, what kind of internet connections are available. And especially one of that's really important in the future is that how to make sure this kind of business model with accessibility expertise when collaborating with more private sector, or how to coordinate private sector with a very fragmented field of disability research, because disability, the best available data on disability often comes from very fragmented field of actors, and there is a limited amount of data collection. How to gather all of that in the same place and also collaborate in a business kind of model where it's not just NGOs, because we all know that those innovations and projects that seek to create revenue and income have greater demands. And this is what we have also tried to strategically work in Abilis, that we can provide that kind of realistic assessment. And then the section 5, our resource library, is that this is now the best available data existing, I would say, in late 2020, early 2021 that we have been able to gather. So we have thematically tried to gather access resources of our organization and divide it thematically. So there is mobile phone access, there is assistive applications, assistive software, communication access, video access, making websites accessible, making online meetings accessible, doing universal design in your work in generally. Like, we have thematically tried to gather around these solutions, around these kind of thematic topics. So I can quickly show that section 1, starting from the overall picture on disability, explaining in very practical terms what do we mean with it. All the pictures are from practical Abilis work. Selecting top 10 tips for you. Why is inclusion important? What kind of digital solutions you can try? So there is always a description of the solution, and then there is the direct link you can go and try. Our key stakeholder tips, and then the broad resource library. So we have thematically, for example, digital accessibility starts here, and the next one is mobile phone accessibility. So it's supposed to be easy, at least in our view. The idea was to create something that's usable, that it's easy to find what you're looking for. But once again, we haven't done this kind of broad work with Fingo before, so I would say that collecting feedback is very important, and there are the contact information, I think, from Mika and then to Abilis Consulting, to people like me and James, so we can be in touch then later on, and you can see how it fits. I think due to the pandemic, it has taken, well, it will take longer time for some solutions to be utilized in practice, but that's something where we hope that the feedback, and once again, that due to the nature of technological innovations moving forward fast, this is not something you create and then it's done. This is something that we have to constantly, I think, keep updating in the coming years. So this was just a very brief overall presentation, but I'm happy to answer questions, especially later on when people have had more time to get in depth with the product.
Thanks very much, Thomas. Great overview and introduction to the toolkit, the guide. And now I would ask you all to open the chat window, and there's now a link to the Jamboard. I will also share my screen and just show how it works quickly, and so we can use it for a few minutes. It's not going to be any group work. You are just individually able to post sticky notes there and share your questions, concerns, tips, thoughts, any feedback at this moment, and we can use it as kind of a material for discussion as well. So just a second. Are you able? Yes, there are quite many people already there. So I'll now share the screen. And as you can see in the first window, it just shows how to move between these slides. In the second slide, it shows instructions how to create sticky notes. So just here from the toolbar, you can click, then write your thoughts, notes, questions, and they are all anonymous. And then in the third slide, here is space for questions, comments, tips, or wishes. And let's now just spend a couple of minutes. Click on the sticky note, and anything related to the guide that you have now linked to the Tuomas presentation or other things you would like to give feedback. In case you are not able to access a Jamboard, that's not a problem. You can also write to the chat window in the Zoom. And after having your feedback, questions, comments, we'll continue then with the Q&A and discussion. Then while waiting for those that input, I'm going to ask Tuomas that there are, you talked about, and in the tips, there's this as an organization to make a commitment to disability, accessibility, and inclusion. So could you talk a little bit more about the commitment, what it could be, what it could entail, or just some practical thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I think it's important that things are not additional burden. Like disability is not easy. There are the different thematics of disability, physical disability, visual, like all over the place. Disability has different cultural connotations. So when working with inclusion in Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, Russia, but what are the regional contexts? What are disability inclusion in practice, in like daily work of the organization? Like how do you organize, how to do human resources, how to do meetings, and then like project level work in many different kind of levels. So it's a lot. So it's not something where you go through one day training and you become an expert. It's like ever evolving field, and there's never one person that has all the information. So for example, in Abilis consulting, if we do project like this, then we include with visual impairment, there is hearing impairment, there is physical impairment, there are different thematic areas of expertise and so on. So I think it's a very collaborative effort. So the best way for an organization to do it, we have often done that, we create a memorandum of understanding with them and with my organization, like such as Abilis. And then we have this kind of multi-year where we set like 6 months ago, like basic introductions to disability and how to move forward. What does it mean in the work? Then let's test some practical concept, how to include it in the work, then collect feedback, and then so it's, I would say in 3 years, it's slowly integrated really well to different levels if you don't try to haste. So my most important tip and what we try to offer is this kind of a no pressure kind of time frame where you have time to test and really think, because disabilities, it's not often easy, and then depending on what the organization does, where do you do work, how it's scaled, big or small, they all come into play.
Good, thanks. There are already some feedback, and there was one question that this is great work, really useful and needed. A question related to being online. Does the guideline give tips on online safety? And now there are tons of sources there. We don't have any particular in the guidebook separate safety guidelines. There are maybe a little bit more overall information, but Tuomas, can you recall if any of the resources linked contain those online safety?
There is no direct guide, because I think online safety in terms of disability is very similar to online safety to general population. There is very little disability specifics. I think where it steps into line is that there are all kind of small access features by smaller startups that might include blocking issues with larger acting programs, such as like Microsoft working, Microsoft Firewall, Apple iOS. But we have also targeted that in that there is like Android section and Mac section on access tips, that often the easiest way to start is then to use what the organization. So for example, both Microsoft and Apple have their own access platforms, which are on the guideline where you can start with. So often it's not really it's safety only through this kind of how compatible different technological solutions are with each other, that due to safety protocols, they might block each other.
Yeah, and by the way, since not everybody is accessing the Jamboard, I will also show the content here, and you can also just open the mic and ask floor, so that's also a channel to contribute. There's a question that is this primarily for Finnish NGOs, or can it be used by partners in the global south as well? I think the question is obvious that yes, it is for Finnish NGOs, Fingo's member organizations, but definitely it is also for partners in the global south. And everybody who, let's say, all the development actors.
There are to baseline question, I think also very good questions. First of all, consider bringing the guidebook into a website. I think this is something we have to discuss with Fingo further on, that I think at least due to the nature of the field, as I went through in the opening statement, it definitely requires like constant updating. So I think that's something for Mika to answer, like what will be the nature of Powerbank in the future, because I don't think this is the only one where information gets old pretty quickly, but it can, because innovations are developed. When it comes to there is on the access of people with disabilities from children to adult, there are actually like special, if you check to what the resources, there are like special learning platforms and apps and solutions that are targeted for children. I think there are 2 of them. And then I would say that in what countries have been developing, this is something that's, for example, these solutions have been used by people we know in Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, very, very universally. But I would say that lots of them are targeted for English-speaking countries. And now this is where our guideline will talk more about this. There are language issues, but what happens is that when technological solutions are developed, they are often developed for the broadest possible population. This often leads to the fact that they are developed first in English, because English is the lingua franca that destroys all the small languages in its way. For example, in practice, I would say disability inclusion in technology is further ahead in Kenya and Uganda than it's in Ethiopia. Why? Because Kenya and Uganda have broader English-speaking population. English is the official language. So the bigger percentage of disabled population, for example, able to speak English, leads to better results in terms of, often these are not, there are lots of like Swahili applications, for example, and in major languages in their own region, like Russian and Mandarin Chinese, definitely you will find, but often it requires, so if I would be a disabled person only knowing Finnish, that would limit 90% of the solutions away from me. So I think linguistics is important to keep in mind.
There was a question, just considering that the technology is so quickly changing and old information turns obsolete, have you considered to bring the guidebook in the website to be updated accordingly? Yes, that's a very good point. Now, I think this will hopefully last for this year, but we do need to make an update, and making actually as a website is something we can consider. There are some practical also changes in Fingo Powerbank because of this guide. First, we already have a technology solutions portfolio there, where we have kind of tried and tested solutions available for NGOs and other development actors to easily identify and test if they are feasible for them. We haven't had a particular disability inclusion kind of technology section yet, but now with these tools listed in the toolkit, we are going to establish also a section for disability inclusion there on digital development. Then we are also going to review the events we are going to organize. So what kind of tools and ways to use to make these more accessible, like this live captioning is one thing that we have now added. Just we were able to get it working. This is something to be tested among others. And also then with this one, we are better able to give support to the NGOs, and for example, through the innovation experiments to have more emphasis on disability inclusion, also when utilizing technology in development work. So a few examples there. Maybe this could go to Tuomas. There are quite many interesting tools listed on the toolkit. I wonder whether are there any real-life case examples on using these tools you could share? Actually, yeah, that was the other one, and also there was the one that I wanted to give to you, Tuomas, was the. Would you like to mention any highlights that have seemed particularly useful and innovative to you? So let's take that one first.
It's a hard selection. I would say that this year, for example, there is the checkline guideline for accessible meetings. I think due to COVID, all of you have had amazing amount of accessible meetings. So it's really simple, and you're surprised how small the array of changes is that already makes it inclusive for 90% of the population. One of the other issue I would say is that the development of organizations on corporations themselves. So for example, if there is the links in the part 6 of the toolkit to Apple iOS, Google Android, and Windows Microsoft current solutions, and that's constantly updating. So how it's already adaptable, for example, to different to complete blindness, and helping to make all of your existing without creating special kind of application. Because I think one of the way how we approach inclusion is that we do not want to create separate disability solution. We want to make the solution that everyone uses. Like it's the same thing with buildings. But for example, if there is a building with stairs in it, I want to make the front door accessible with a ramp instead of creating special disability door somewhere in the back that creates this kind of division. I think that at least to me, this is like also like slightly ideological point of view. So I think in lots of the solutions, the most promising have been that it creates and helps to make what we are already. It helps make Zoom, whether it's Skype, whether it's your doc files. And then there are all kinds of like little solutions. For example, with doc files, you have to take only a few things into consideration. With PDF files, making them accessible is all very, very difficult. So for example, I just used a PDF here, and if I would share it completely online, I would rather you do it in Word format because PDF is not so good. So there are like, I think the best solution or best practice is that with very small array of changes here and there, you're already able to grasp like 90% of the population that otherwise wouldn't have the access. I would say that also like innovations that describe pictures, because that's a big problem, because with screen reader, I can obviously read the text. So how do I know when people are commenting picture with the text, how do I know what's in the picture? The way the programs are actually describing the content of the picture are improving a lot.
Thanks. Great thoughts. I think one of my favorites in the list is Seeing AI by Microsoft. You can find it there. It's quite a versatile tool that turns your mobile phone into a kind of multifunctional eye that can translate text on any kind of packages or papers. It can describe what is happening around you and so on and so on. There's quite a lot of material, so check it out as well. The question about any real life case examples using these tools you could share. Yes, there are, but before giving anything, this is a question for the whole audience. So please, if you know any development projects by NGOs or other development actors that you know have been using technology for disability inclusion, please write it either in the Jamboard or then to the chat window. That would be really nice to hear, kind of a bit of crowdsourcing from the audience. So I'm not sure if you already answered this, but which countries have been involved in making this toolkit?
Yeah, that was very broad effort. I have tried to consult all over the place. I would say that when thinking of the project area, and especially where these kind of hubs where innovations are developed, I would say Eastern African countries are most active at the moment due to technology hubs being created there. So I would say that especially Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, like what's usable at the moment, and that's where the linguistic barrier issue steps in a lot. That those countries where English is, due to colonial history or other reason, a major language, those countries have much wider, like disabled, actually, because disabled people are always poorly educated, poorer, and lowly employed compared to the mainstream population, even in Finland. So the linguistic skills of disabled population is always below the national average. So if a country, if English is not one of the prime languages of the country, then just the linguistics then creates these barriers, because these are created by people, experts in many countries simultaneously, and like American presence, UK presence is strong. So I would say that at least to my understanding, 90% of the technology startups are working in English, and that means the first product to go out to be before it gets translated. For example, even in especially in visual impairment, that we have had, like I have had issues with blind people in certain Eastern European countries, that what popular screen readers, that how quickly do they adapt to new language and new words. So it's much quicker in English than it's in, for example, Serbo-Croatian.
Yes. We are soon coming to the end of the meeting. Couple of questions that we can still take. There was just about the practical cases. I'm giving two very general ones. First, many of you already know that 3D printing has been used for printing prostheses in many global South countries. That has been kind of experimental work. One thing that I would like to highlight here from the toolkit is this Braille Me, and this is very interesting product that is being used in, for example, East Africa. It is actually produced in Kenya. They have sales in Kenya, and here is the small Braille kind of a printer, which is fairly affordable and very versatile tool for visually impaired people. They have the website, so check it out as well. This is something that we have been looking forward to being integrated to some of the projects. At the moment, there is one of the experiments in this year that Fingo Powerbank has been involved in is for disability inclusion, and they are using digital data collection to gather data, and there are also people with disabilities gathering the data with those, but the results and the details will be shared later on. However, if you have any examples you would like to share with the audience, please do so by writing to the chat. And then Irena is now talking follow-up to Ture's point about technology hubs. Is there a list of hubs that you have worked with? Where is one you could find local tech and disability inclusion know-how? Excellent point. I don't think that we have such a list at the moment. There are obviously many hubs that we have been working with, but who would be the best placed in terms of disability inclusion? That's probably the next step that we could do. Maybe Tuomas, you have
we have a very good question, and if Irena, you can send me email, we can delve into that further, because that's something we are working also with one Finnish polytechnic school that's part of our innovation hub to develop this, because there are now multiple of them, and the one in Nairobi has received this kind of special funding for AT and assistive technology, but it's a little bit delved into like more assistive technology in terms of like helping people move and use sanitation and this kind of very practical. But on digital inclusion front, they are advancing a little bit slower, and whereas the startups are becoming inclusive pretty organically by using disabled people. So that's something that's ongoing, but we'll be happy to, because we also would like to participate in innovation hubs closer on.
Mika Niskanen, if you're there, you could also copy paste the feedback form so that before you are leaving this session, you could just give us 1 or 2 minutes to give feedback for this event. That would be very, very much appreciated. Ari is saying that on the next level, you could make practical videos to use the apps, as I presume almost everyone in the South have very little knowledge on these apps. This could ease the pain to start and learn that I'm doing. Yes, very much so, Ari. We already have some videos available, but not from the tools listed in this guide. So that's definitely to be done. It typically helps also to understand how any tool, whether it's a digital service or physical kind of a gadget, how does it actually work, and whether it could have a relevance or feasibility to the projects that NGOs are currently implementing. So yeah, check out the chat. Mika has just posted the feedback form, so do click that and fill it in before we are ending this. So I would really much like to, I'm just checking, yeah, no other questions there, so it's perfect timing. Thanks very much for Abilis Consulting. Thanks for Tuomas, James O'Sullivan. Excellent work, and I hope this will be helpful for a lot of organizations. And as said, whatever feedback you have, please bring it on, and then in the next update, it can be improved further.
Absolutely, and this is something compared to multiple ways of work. This is something where we see lots of opportunities, because this is still taking like very much baby steps in the terms of 3 years ago. The whole topic of inclusive IT and digital technology was not in the field of development at all. So it's something that's probably going to expand and scale a lot in the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. So just advertising the feedback form now, and otherwise we can call it a day. Thanks for your participation again, and have a good start of the week.